Welcome back, guys. Today we are going to break down, from start to finish, exactly how Jimin managed to fuse the world of ballads and hip-hop into one album, and why that artistic move sent shockwaves through the global music industry. To understand why Jimin's artistic pivot was so startling, we need to take a step back and look at who he actually was in the eyes of the music world before all of this. Park Jimin debuted with BTS in 2013. From the very beginning, he was known for two things: being an extraordinary dancer and having a truly distinctive voice, soft, airy, ethereal, with a rare ability to carry deep emotion through every single note. His first solo moment that genuinely stopped people in their tracks came with Lie, from BTS's 2016 album Wings. With its dramatic arrangement and intense vocal delivery, Lie was the first real proof that Jimin was not just a supporting vocalist. He was a performer capable of carrying emotionally heavy material entirely on his own. Then came Serendipity, a soft, dreamy romantic ballad that immediately found a place in the hearts of ARMY fans around the world. This was the Jimin everyone knew best, a voice like a spring breeze, melodies that flow like a quiet river. Then in 2023, Jimin made his true official solo debut with his mini-album Face, and it surprised everyone. Dark themes, a raw confrontation with his innermost self, and tracks like Set Me Free PT2, which blended orchestral production with raw, energetic hip-hop undertones. Billboard called Face one of the best K-pop albums of 2023. Like Crazy exploded, making Jimin the highest charting Korean soloist on the Billboard Hot 100 for a solo track. But as it turned out, that was only the opening act. Because 1 year later, Jimin came back with something even bolder. July 19, 2024, Jimin releases his second solo album, Muse. Here's what makes it remarkable from the very start. At the time of release, Jimin was actively serving his mandatory South Korean military service. There were no promotions, no concerts, no interviews, just music, carefully prepared before he enlisted, suddenly landing in the ears of the entire world. And the response? Muse exploded. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, earning over 96,000 album equivalent units in its first week alone. In South Korea, over 771,000 copies were sold within that same first week. On Billboard's Global 200 chart, Muse sat at number 1 for 2 consecutive weeks, a milestone Jimin had never reached before. But the most interesting part was never the numbers. The most interesting part was what was actually on the record. If Face was dark, introspective, and at times almost painful to sit with, Muse was the exact opposite. This was Jimin finding hope again, finding love, rediscovering the source of his inspiration. And to tell that story, he chose not one genre, but many at once. Billboard, in their review, described Muse as proof of Jimin being a genre-less artist, someone who simply cannot be confined to a single musical box. The album touched on R&B grooves, light hip-hop, Latin-influenced sounds, Afrobeat flavors, jazz big band energy, and deeply emotional ballads. All of it packed into 7 tracks. 7 colors. 1 soul. Now we get to the most crucial part. How exactly did Jimin bring ballads and hip-hop together? And why was it so shocking when he did? Let's go track by track. The album opens with Rebirth, and it immediately sounds unlike anything Jimin had released before. The production is grand and sweeping. His vocals drift in softly at first, melancholic and poetic, like someone just waking from a long and dreamless sleep. This is the ballad Jimin we know and love. But then the production starts to swell. A choir builds behind him. A dramatic rise begins. And then for just a moment, the music feels like it's about to burst right through your speakers. This is not just a ballad. This is a ballad injected with orchestral ambition, an immediate statement that this album is not going to play it safe. Then comes Smeraldo Garden Marching Band, featuring rapper Loco, and this is where things get genuinely surprising. Imagine a full marching band sound, a festive and joyful brass section, an atmosphere like a theme park in full swing, and then suddenly, a hip-hop beat drops in, and Loco arrives with a completely different kind of energy. Jimin sings above it all with a lightness and playfulness that makes his voice feel like it's literally bouncing. The Cross, in their review, described this track as a marching band that fuses big band with hip-hop influences and compared its atmosphere to a K-drama scene where two main characters meet in an amusement park and begin falling for each other. It sounds simple when you describe it, but that's precisely the artistry. Taking two worlds that are technically very far apart, classic brass music from the big band era and urban hip-hop, and making the combination feel completely natural and unforced. And then there is Who. This is the moment. The track at the center of every conversation about Jimin and genre fusion. Who is the lead single of Muse. It is the only fully English-language track on the album, and it is something no one expected from Jimin. The Teen magazine described it as a song with hip-hop and R&B influences that is upbeat and catchy. The Cross called it an early 2000s R&B hip-hop track with engaging acoustic guitar and brilliant choreography. Grammy.com wrote in their analysis that Jimin drew from pop, R&B, and hip-hop sounds of the early 2000s to give the album a warm, vintage quality, and that it comes through most clearly in Who, with its delightful guitar strums. But look closer. On one side, Who has a groovy hip-hop beat, a bass line you feel in your chest, and a rhythm that makes your head move without you even realizing it. That is the hip-hop half of it. On the other side, there is Jimin's vocal melody, which never once loses its softness. There are moments where his voice rises in a way that only a trained ballad singer can pull off. There is emotion flowing through every single line of the lyrics. Who is my heart waiting for? That is not a question written by a rapper. That is a question written by a poet who also happens to know how to build a beat that makes a crowd go wild. And the music video? Jimin walks through the streets of a city at night with a rock edge cool that is slightly reminiscent of Michael Jackson during the Bad era. This is a visual identity we had simply never seen from an artist previously celebrated for soft, romantic performances. For balance, there is Slow Dance, featuring Sophia Carson. This is the purest ballad on the album, smooth, velvety R&B, a slow and swaying beat, and two voices that complement each other with effortless precision. This is the Jimin we know well, but now heard with so much richer context, because we have already heard him experiment with everything that came before on this record. And the album closes with Closer Than This, a song Jimin released as a gift to ARMY before entering the military. Billboard described it as a soothing blend of acoustic guitar layered over a subtle hip-hop beat. It sits perfectly in the middle ground between ballad and hip-hop, a meeting point that feels like the ideal way to close an album built on genre exploration. So how did the critics actually respond? And why were they so surprised? The answer is, with productive shock. Not disappointment, not confusion. Surprise that quickly turned into genuine admiration. Billboard called Jimin a genre-less artist, and that is one of the highest compliments you can give a musician. It means Jimin cannot be categorized, cannot be put in a box. He is an artist who transcends genre labels entirely. Think about how rare that actually is. In the music industry, and especially in K-pop, artists almost always have their lane. Ballad singer, rapper, pop artist, R&B artist. Jimin chose not to have a lane at all, and instead built his own road. Grammy.com highlighted 5 key takeaways from Muse and expressed clear admiration for the way Jimin used nostalgic sonic references from the early 2000s without ever feeling outdated. That is genuinely difficult to pull off. Taking an older sound and making it feel fresh, current, and emotionally relevant in 2024 is a skill that very few artists have. NME gave the album a positive review, with critic Rian Daly writing that Muse still carries an ambivalent tension, even if far more subtle than Jimin's debut. NME praised how the album forms a cohesive and polished whole, even if it takes fewer risks than Face. That is actually a meaningful observation. Muse may be less radical on the surface than Face, but that is precisely what makes it work. Because Jimin was not experimenting for the sake of experimenting. He was experimenting with a clear purpose, to tell a story about love and inspiration, and to use genre as a storytelling tool. View of the Arts praised Muse for drawing on old-school hip-hop with Latin-influenced beats and jazz big band music, and described it as presenting a picture of an artist whose future is not dictated by his past. That line deserves to sit for a moment. An artist whose future is not dictated by his past. That is the entire point. Jimin did not allow himself to be trapped by a single identity. He kept evolving, kept expanding, kept surprising. And what shocked critics most was not just the genre work. It was the context surrounding the album. Jimin released Muse while inside a military barracks. Not one promotional performance. No variety show appearances. No launch concert. Just the music itself. And that music was strong enough to stand completely on its own, reach #1 globally, and keep the entire world talking. That is proof that when art is made with genuine intention and soul, no amount of marketing can replicate it. Many artists attempt to blend genres. Not all of them succeed. So what was Jimin's secret? There are 3 things that made this genre experiment work. The first is that his voice became the bridge. The key to everything is Jimin's voice itself. It has a quality that is genuinely rare, soft enough for the most emotionally delicate ballad, but strong enough to hold its own above a hard-hitting hip-hop beat. He can sing with incredible gentleness, but he can also deliver with explosive energy. In Who, his voice never sounds forced over the hip-hop production. It flows naturally because his vocal flexibility is that extraordinary. This is what reviewers meant when they said the production needs to complement Jimin's vocals. When that alignment happens, the results are extraordinary. The second is that the lyrics became the thread that held everything together. Even as the genre shifts from track to track, the emotional theme of Muse never wavers. Searching for love, searching for inspiration, rediscovering oneself. The lyrics of Rebirth are about new hope. Smeraldo Garden Marching Band is about the joy of meeting someone. Who is about the beautiful confusion of falling in love. Slow Dance is about intimacy. Closer Than This is about a bond that cannot be broken. Every single track is telling the same story, just wearing different genre clothing. That is smart storytelling. Genre is the costume, but the narrative remains one. The third is the courage to refuse expectations. This is perhaps the most important factor. Jimin could have released a safe ballad album. ARMY would have bought it. The charts would have filled up. Everyone would have been satisfied. But he chose to take a risk, chose to experiment, chose to surprise. And that courage is exactly what made critics, who may have been prepared to write a standard K-pop review, pause, listen again, and produce reviews that were far longer and far more thoughtful than usual. Because there was something genuinely worth unpacking, something worth discussing, and the results speak for themselves. Muse debuted at #2 on the Billboard 200, the second consecutive time Jimin had reached that position with a solo album, following Face, which had done the same. He became the first Korean artist to achieve this feat with 2 consecutive solo albums. The single Who won K-Pop Song of the Year at the 2025 iHeartRadio Music Awards, a major recognition from the American music industry, not merely driven by fan votes alone, but acknowledged by the industry itself. At the 34th Seoul Music Awards in 2025, Jimin received the Hallyu Special Award, a recognition of his extraordinary contribution to spreading Korean culture across the globe. And even without taking home the trophy, Jimin's nomination as Favorite K-Pop Artist at the 2025 American Music Awards, standing alongside names like Rose of Blackpink and Stray Kids, is proof that his position in the global music industry is completely unshakable. All of this with 0 promotional performances. No concerts. From inside a military base. If that is not proof of the pure power of honest art, nothing is. Visual. Photos of Jimin after military discharge. Photos with fellow BTS members. Jimin was officially discharged from the military on June 11, 2025. And the world is watching. With 2 solo albums already proving his fearlessness as an artist. Face, dark and confrontational, and Muse, warm yet full of experimentation. The question now is simple. Where does Jimin go from here? Does he dive deeper into hip-hop? Does he return to a more classical ballad sound? Or does he discover an entirely new genre that none of us have even imagined yet? One thing is already clear. Jimin is not an artist who will ever stay still inside a single formula. He is a musician who keeps asking, of himself, of his music, of his listeners, what comes next? And the answer to that question is always more surprising than any of us expected. So there it is, guys. The full story of how Jimin brought the world of ballads and hip-hop together, and why that move left critics genuinely speechless. Not because they doubted Jimin's ability, but because no one anticipated he would do it with this much intelligence and elegance. He did not abandon his identity as a ballad singer. He did not suddenly reinvent himself as a rapper. He took both worlds and stitched them together with threads of emotion, powerful lyrics, and a kind of artistic courage that is genuinely rare. The result? Not just a great album, a statement. A statement that great music has no borders and no genre ceiling. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, and share it with every army in your life. Drop a comment below. Which track from Muse is your favorite? And do you prefer Jimin the ballad artist or Jimin the hip-hop experimenter? See you in the next one. Musical Note Sparkles.